There are places on this planet that were never supposed to exist. Ancient cities hidden inside mountains, giant stone fortresses abandoned in deserts, underground temples carved beneath the earth itself. Across the world, archaeologists keep uncovering ruins so strange. They continue to challenge everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. Some of these places were buried for centuries, others were hidden behind jungles, cliffs, volcanoes, and endless sand. And the deeper researchers explore these forgotten worlds, the more mysterious human history begins to feel. Because some ancient structures don't just look impressive, they look impossible. But before we begin, I want you to do something. Comment below your country and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing where people are watching from around the world, especially this late at night. And if mysteries like these fascinate you, subscribe before you fall asleep. The mysterious tomb, some believe belongs to the prophet Jeremiah. Hidden among the green hills of Ireland, surrounded by ancient earthworks, cold wind and forgotten stone ruins, there is a burial mound connected to one of the strangest legends in Irish history. A giant ancient tomb hidden beneath the landscape, mysterious passages disappearing underground, and a theory so unusual that for generations people claimed a biblical prophet may have been buried there. The place is connected to Karen Temple, and even today, the strange stories surrounding the ancient mound continue to blur the line between archaeology, legend, and myth. Because this was not simply another burial site. Some believed it held connections reaching all the way back to the ancient Middle East. Karen Temple lies within the Irish countryside, surrounded by rolling green hills, mist-covered fields, and scattered ruins older than recorded history itself. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold rain moves across the valleys beneath grey skies. Wind passes through empty grasslands and broken stone walls, and hidden beneath the earth, the ancient mound rises quietly from the landscape, almost blending into the hills around it. The first sight feels emotionally strange. Unlike towering castles or giant monuments, the mound appears silent, subtle, almost intentionally hidden beneath the landscape itself. But beneath the grass and earth, ancient chambers and burial spaces remain buried inside the hill. The atmosphere surrounding the site feels deeply haunting, especially during evening. Fog moves slowly across the fields while silence settles over the mound beneath dark skies. And because Ireland itself is filled with prehistoric monuments, sacred landscapes, and forgotten ruins, the place almost feels disconnected from ordinary time. The mystery surrounding the tomb grew from legend. According to strange stories repeated for generations, the site became linked to the biblical prophet Jeremiah, a major figure from the ancient Near East connected to the destruction of Jerusalem thousands of years ago. Certain fringe theories claimed Jeremiah may have travelled west after the fall of ancient Judah, eventually reaching Ireland carrying sacred relics and hidden knowledge with him. That idea transformed the burial mound into something far stranger than an ordinary archaeological site. Suddenly, the Irish countryside became connected to biblical history itself. Most historians reject the theory completely. There is no accepted archaeological evidence proving Jeremiah ever travelled anywhere near Ireland. Yet the legend refused to disappear, because emotionally, the idea feels enormous. Ancient Middle Eastern prophets crossing oceans long before conventional history believed such journeys possible. The mound itself deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient burial sites across Ireland often contain underground chambers, aligned with seasonal events, ceremonial traditions, and prehistoric rituals older than written history. Stone passages disappear beneath the earth, leading into hidden spaces built by forgotten communities thousands of years ago. That ancient atmosphere helped fuel stories surrounding Karen Temple even further. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing near the mound. The silence feels heavy. Wind moves through empty fields while the buried chambers remain hidden beneath the earth exactly where ancient builders left them long ago. The surrounding Irish landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dark clouds move above green hills beneath constant rain and mist. Ancient ruins appear scattered across the countryside, and because so much prehistoric history in Ireland remains connected to oral tradition and legend, the line between myth and archaeology often feels blurred. Over time, stranger theories inevitably appeared. Some people believed sacred objects from biblical history were hidden somewhere beneath the mound untouched for centuries. Others imagine secret underground chambers still remain undiscovered beneath the Irish countryside. A few even claimed ancient Ireland preserved forgotten connections to civilizations far beyond Europe itself. Most archaeologists reject those stories completely. But the mystery surrounding the mound never fully disappeared, because somewhere beneath the green hills of Ireland, an ancient burial site still rests beneath the earth, surrounded by legends connecting it to one of the strangest and most controversial stories in biblical archaeology, the giant lost city hidden beneath Guatemala's jungle. Deep within the rainforests of Guatemala, beyond rivers, swamps, and endless walls of jungle, there are ruins of an ancient city so massive that for centuries the forest completely swallowed it from the world. Gigantic pyramids buried beneath trees, ancient temples hidden under vines and earth, and the remains of a forgotten Maya kingdom once powerful enough to rival the greatest cities in Central America. The place is known as El Peruhuaca, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious lost cities ever uncovered in the Maya world. Because this was not simply another jungle ruin. It was a giant political and ceremonial capital hidden beneath the rainforest itself. El Peruhuaca lies deep within Guatemala's Petén region, surrounded by dense tropical jungle, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The environment feels overwhelming immediately. Heavy rain falls through thick green canopy beneath dark skies. Insects echo through the forest while heat rises from the earth itself. And hidden beneath layers of roots, vines, and collapsed stone, the ancient city slowly emerges from the jungle floor. The first sight feels emotionally unreal. Massive pyramids rising above the trees, broken stairways disappearing into vegetation, ancient plazas buried beneath centuries of rainforest growth. Unlike restored tourist sites surrounded by roads and cities, El Peruhuaca still feels isolated, wild, almost untouched. The atmosphere surrounding the ruins feels deeply haunting, especially during early morning. Mist drifts between giant trees while jungle sounds echo through abandoned temple complexes hidden beneath the canopy. And because the forest constantly grows around the structures, the city almost feels alive somehow, half buried, half remembered. Historians believe El Peruhuaca became one of the major Maya kingdoms during the Classic period more than 1,000 years ago. Its location placed it near important trade routes and political boundaries between rival city-states across the Maya world. Kings ruled there, wars were fought there, ceremonies unfolded there beneath giant pyramids rising from the jungle. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Archaeologists uncovered massive temple complexes, royal tombs, carved monuments, defensive structures, and enormous plazas spread across the forest landscape. At its height, tens of thousands of people may have lived within the surrounding region connected to the city's power. The emotional effect becomes powerful while moving through the ruins. Everything feels hidden. Stone faces emerge unexpectedly from roots and earth. Ancient staircases vanish beneath vegetation. Entire structures remain barely visible beneath the jungle growth. It feels less like visiting ruins, and more like discovering them. The carvings deepen the mystery further. Maya rulers were immortalized across giant stone monuments known as stelae, recording wars, alliances, rituals, and dynasties through hieroglyphic inscriptions. The Maya possessed astonishing knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and timekeeping long before Europeans reached the Americas. That intelligence still survives carved into the stones scattered through the forest. The surrounding jungle changes everything emotionally. Rainfall slowly erodes ancient walls. Roots crack open buried chambers. Animals move through abandoned plazas where kings once ruled centuries ago. The rainforest is not simply surrounding the city, it is consuming it. Then came the collapse. Like many Maya kingdoms, El Peruhuaca eventually declined during the Great Collapse that transformed much of the Maya world. Political instability, warfare, drought, environmental stress, and social collapse likely weakened the city over generations. The population disappeared, the temples emptied, and slowly the jungle swallowed the city whole. That disappearance transformed El Peruhuaca into legend. For centuries, enormous pyramids and royal tombs remained hidden beneath rainforest without the outside world realizing what still existed there. The mystery only deepened after rediscovery, because even now, archaeologists continue uncovering new structures, inscriptions and hidden chambers buried beneath the jungle floor. Large parts of the city remain unexplored. Over time, stranger theories inevitably appeared. Some people believed hidden royal treasures still remain sealed beneath undiscovered pyramids, untouched for over 1,000 years. Others imagined secret underground tunnels connect temple complexes beneath the forest itself. A few even claimed the Maya possessed lost astronomical and engineering knowledge modern civilization still does not fully understand. Most historians reject the more extreme stories completely, but the mystery surrounding El Peruwaka never disappeared. The ancient city buried beneath the sands of Iraq. Deep within the plains of Iraq, surrounded by dry earth, broken ruins and endless desert wind, there are remains of an ancient city once built for kings who ruled one of the greatest empires of the Bronze Age. Massive temple towers rising above the sands, ancient palaces buried beneath the earth, and the ruins of a forgotten royal capital swallowed by centuries of dust and silence. The place is known as Dur Kurigalzu, and even today it remains one of the most mysterious lost cities of ancient Mesopotamia, because this was not simply another settlement beside the rivers of Iraq. It was a royal city built by an empire that disappeared thousands of years ago. Dur Kurigalzu lies near modern Baghdad, surrounded by flat desert plains and ancient river valleys, where some of the world's earliest civilizations first emerged. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across dry earth beneath pale skies. Dust drifts across broken stone and collapsed mud brick walls, and rising above the empty landscape itself, the remains of a giant ziggurat still dominate the horizon, exactly where ancient builders raised it more than 3,000 years ago. The first sight feels emotionally overwhelming. A massive stepped structure towering above the plains like a mountain built by human hands. Cracked mud brick walls stretching toward the sky, ruined foundations disappearing beneath layers of sand and earth. The atmosphere surrounding the city feels deeply haunting, especially during sunset. Golden light moves across the broken ruins while silence spreads across the desert floor. And because so much of the ancient city remains buried beneath the ground, the landscape almost feels unfinished, as though an entire civilization still sleeps beneath the earth waiting to be uncovered. Historians believe Dur Kurigalzu was founded by the Kassite king Kurigalzu during the 14th century BCE, after the Kassites gained control over Babylon. The city became a major political and religious center during a period when Mesopotamia stood among the most advanced regions on Earth. Kings ruled there, priests worshipped there. Trade crossed the region, connecting distant civilizations through the ancient Near East. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Archaeologists uncovered traces of massive palaces, temples, defensive walls, ceremonial spaces and administrative buildings spread across the plains. At the center stood the enormous ziggurat, a giant temple tower built to connect earth and heaven, together according to ancient Mesopotamian belief. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside the ruins. The city feels buried rather than destroyed. Large sections remain hidden beneath sand and collapsed mud brick after thousands of years of erosion. The outlines of ancient streets and structures still emerge faintly across the landscape beneath the desert wind. The ziggurat itself deepens the mystery further. Ancient Mesopotamian civilizations believed these towering structures carried spiritual significance, connecting humanity with the gods above. Priests climbed enormous stairways towards sacred chambers positioned high above the city. The structures dominated the skyline for miles across the flat plains of Mesopotamia. The surrounding desert changes everything emotionally. No forests, no mountains, only endless open land stretching toward the horizon. And because ancient Mesopotamian cities were often built from mud brick rather than stone, time slowly erased enormous portions of the civilization itself back into the earth. That disappearance transformed places like Dur Kurigalzu into ghost cities beneath the sand. Then came the collapse. Empires shifted. Wars spread across Mesopotamia. Political power moved elsewhere, and gradually, the royal city declined while wind, dust, and centuries buried much of it beneath the plains of Iraq. That silence deepens the mystery enormously, because this region once held some of humanity's earliest cities, writing systems, laws, astronomy, and monumental architecture. Yet many ancient capitals now survive only as broken mounds scattered across the desert. Over time, stranger theories inevitably appeared. Some people believed hidden royal tombs and untouched treasures still remain buried beneath the city untouched for thousands of years. Others imagined secret, underground chambers survive beneath the ziggurat containing lost knowledge from ancient Mesopotamia. A few even claimed forgotten records hidden beneath the ruins could completely rewrite what historians understand about the ancient world. Most archaeologists reject the more extreme stories completely, but the mystery surrounding Durkarigalzu never disappeared. The forgotten temple city hidden beneath Laos mountains, high in the mountains of Laos, surrounded by jungle rivers, mist-covered cliffs and ancient stone pathways, there are ruins of a sacred city so isolated that it almost feels separated from the modern world completely. Massive stairways climbing toward the clouds, ancient shrines hidden deep within forested hills, and a temple complex built directly into the mountain landscape itself more than 1,000 years ago. The place is known as Wat Phu, and even today, its abandoned sanctuaries remain one of Southeast Asia's most mysterious forgotten worlds, because this was never just a temple. It was an entire sacred mountain transformed into a city of ritual, power, and religion. Wat Phu lies in southern Laos near the Mekong River, surrounded by thick jungle, volcanic hills, and enormous green valleys stretching toward the horizon. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm air moves through dense forest beneath grey skies, rain drifts across distant mountains, and hidden among the hillsides, broken stone stairways and temple ruins slowly emerge through the trees. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Long ceremonial roads stretch toward giant terraces climbing the mountainside. Ancient shrines sit beside silent courtyards covered in moss and vines. And above everything, steep cliffs tower directly behind the temple complex as though nature itself became part of the architecture. The atmosphere surrounding Wat Phu feels deeply strange, especially during sunrise. Golden light slowly moves across weathered stone while fog drifts through the jungle valleys below. The mountains disappear behind clouds while birds echo through abandoned corridors and stairways. And because the temple rises gradually toward the cliffs, the entire site feels less like a city and more like a spiritual journey carved into the landscape itself. Historians believe the region carried sacred importance long before the Khmer Empire arrived. Natural springs flowing from the mountain likely made the area spiritually significant to ancient communities thousands of years ago. Water descending from the cliffs became connected to purification, ritual, and divine power. Later, the Khmer civilization transformed the mountain into one of the major religious centers of their empire. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created roads, reservoirs, terraces, stairways, shrines, and ceremonial courtyards stretching across enormous sections of the mountainside. Everything was carefully aligned. The pathways direct visitors upward toward the sacred cliffs above the temple itself. The mountain became the center of the entire design. Researchers believe Wat Phu was dedicated primarily to Shiva within Hindu tradition. The sacred mountain behind the temple symbolized Mount Meru, the mythical center of the universe in Hindu cosmology. That symbolism transformed the landscape emotionally. The mountain itself became sacred architecture. The emotional effect becomes powerful while climbing the ancient stairways. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps rise slowly through jungle and ruined terraces. The higher the climb, the quieter the world becomes. Wind moves through trees while broken shrines appear unexpectedly among the stones. The entire ascent feels intentional, designed to separate visitors gradually from ordinary life below. The carvings deepen the mystery further. Ancient Hindu imagery still survives across walls and doorways, despite centuries of erosion and abandonment. Stone guardians stand beside ruined sanctuaries. Faded carvings of gods, serpents, and sacred symbols remain visible beneath moss and jungle growth. Some corridors lead into dark chambers partially collapsed by time. Others open toward breathtaking views across the Mekong plains far below. The surrounding landscape changes everything emotionally. Dense jungle covers the lower hills. Clouds drift constantly across the cliffs. Monsoon rains move through the valleys during certain seasons while waterfalls descend from the mountains above the ruins. Unlike dry desert civilizations, Wat Phu feels alive. The forest never stops growing around it. The temple slowly disappears and reappears beneath vegetation year after year. The Mekong River itself likely played an important role in the city's power. Ancient trade and movement across Southeast Asia depended heavily on the river network. Pilgrims, merchants, rulers and travellers may have crossed enormous distances to reach the sacred mountain city, hidden beside the jungle valleys. The temple became both spiritual centre and symbol of political authority. Then came transformation. As Buddhism spread through the region, parts of Wat Pho gradually changed from Hindu worship toward Buddhist tradition. New beliefs merged into older sacred landscapes rather than replacing them completely. That blending of religions left layers of spiritual history across the ruins themselves. Over centuries, political shifts, jungle growth, war and abandonment slowly damaged sections of the complex. Stone collapsed, paths disappeared beneath vegetation, and large sections of the mountain temple slowly faded back into the jungle surrounding it. The giant fortress, hidden above Iran's endless forests. Deep within the mountains of northern Iran, beyond rivers, steep jungle paths, and endless walls of fog, there are ruins of a giant fortress so isolated that it almost feels removed from the modern world completely. Massive stone walls stretching across mountain ridges, ancient towers hidden above the clouds, and a forgotten stronghold buried deep inside forests where entire armies once struggled just to reach it. The place is known as Rudkan Castle, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious mountain fortresses anywhere in the Middle East. Because this was not simply a castle, it was a fortress designed to disappear into the mountains themselves. Rudkan Castle stands high within the forested mountains of northern Iran, surrounded by dense jungle, deep valleys, waterfalls, and endless green ridges stretching beneath grey skies. The environment feels unreal immediately. Cold mist moves through enormous trees, rain falls across stone stairways hidden beneath moss and roots, and somewhere above the forest canopy, the giant fortress slowly emerges from the fog. The first approach feels emotionally strange. Unlike ruins built beside cities or deserts, Rudkan feels hidden intentionally. The climb alone takes visitors through long mountain paths surrounded by thick forest and silence. Thousands of stone steps wind upward through jungle and mist. With every step, the outside world feels farther away. The atmosphere surrounding the fortress feels deeply haunting, especially during rain. Clouds drift directly through the ruins while wind echoes across broken towers and empty walls. Entire sections of the castle disappear into white fog before slowly reappearing again through the trees. The mountain weather almost feels alive around the ruins. Then suddenly, the fortress appears. Massive stone walls rising directly from the mountain ridges, ancient defensive towers overlooking endless valleys below, gates, stairways, battlements, and ruined chambers stretching across enormous sections of the forested peaks. The scale feels overwhelming emotionally. The castle does not sit on the mountain. It becomes part of the mountain. Historians believe the fortress originally dates back many centuries, with later rulers expanding and rebuilding sections over time. Its isolated location made it nearly impossible to attack directly. Enemy forces first needed to survive the forests, rivers, cliffs, and mountain terrain before even reaching the walls themselves. That isolation transformed Rudkan into one of the safest strongholds in the region. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Stone corridors disappear into mist. Watchtowers stand above cliffs vanishing into clouds. Broken stairways lead toward hidden sections of the fortress swallowed by vegetation and time, and because the walls follow the natural shape of the mountain so perfectly, the structure almost feels grown from the landscape itself. The surrounding wilderness deepens everything emotionally. Dense forest stretches endlessly below the fortress. Rainwater flows across ancient stone pathways. Birds circle above the valleys while fog covers the ridges beneath dark skies. Unlike dry ancient ruins exposed beneath desert sun, Rudkan feels alive, wet, cold, hidden. The fortress also carried enormous military importance. Its mountain position allowed defenders to watch movement across the valleys far below. Narrow entrances and steep terrain made large invasions extremely difficult. The castle became a protected refuge during periods of conflict and instability across the region. The towers deepen the atmosphere further. Some still stand surprisingly intact despite centuries of storms, earthquakes, abandonment, and war. Small openings remain visible in the stone walls where guards once observed approaching enemies through the forest below. The silence there feels enormous, especially during heavy fog when the valleys completely disappear beneath clouds. Researchers believe the fortress once contained military quarters, water storage systems, defensive gates, living areas, and hidden sections spread across multiple levels of the mountain complex. At its height, the castle functioned almost like a self-contained city hidden above the wilderness. The forests surrounding the fortress likely protected countless secrets over centuries. Travellers crossing the mountains would have struggled to locate the stronghold hidden within the fog-covered ridges. Even now, the approach feels isolated from the modern world. Then slowly, time changed everything. Dynasties collapsed, wars moved elsewhere, trade routes shifted away from the mountains, and gradually, the giant fortress lost its strategic importance, while the forest reclaimed sections of the walls and towers. Rain damaged ancient stone, trees spread through abandoned corridors, moss-covered stairways once used by soldiers and rulers centuries ago. The mountain slowly swallowed parts of the fortress back into the wilderness surrounding it. Some sections collapsed entirely into the forest below. Others survived almost untouched, hidden deep inside the fog-covered peaks. And during certain mornings, when clouds move slowly through the towers and jungle covers the walls, Rudkan Castle barely feels real at all. It feels like the remains of another age still hiding above the forests, where ancient rulers once built a giant fortress nobody was ever supposed to find easily. The massive stone tombs hidden across Algeria's empty highlands. Deep within the mountains of Algeria, far from major cities, forests or rivers, there are giant stone tombs standing alone across the empty landscape, like forgotten monuments from another civilization. Massive pyramid-shaped structures rising from barren hills, ancient burial chambers hidden beneath layers of stone, and mysterious royal tombs so isolated that many people have never even heard they exist. The place is known as the Jeddars, and even today, these enormous stone mausoleums remain some of the strangest ancient ruins anywhere in North Africa, because these were not ordinary graves. They were giant monuments built for rulers whose civilizations slowly vanished into history. The Jeddars stand across the high plains near Tiaret in western Algeria, surrounded by dry hills, rocky valleys, and endless open sky. The environment feels silent immediately. Hot wind moves across empty grasslands beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts between broken stones and scattered ruins, and standing alone across the mountain ridges, the giant tombs rise from the earth exactly where ancient builders placed them centuries ago. The first sight feels emotionally strange. The structures resemble small pyramids built from massive blocks of stone stacked carefully into huge geometric forms. Some remain partially intact. Others collapsed long ago, leaving enormous piles of broken rock scattered across the hillsides. But even in ruin, the scale feels enormous. The atmosphere surrounding the tombs feels deeply isolated, especially during evening. Golden light moves slowly across the stone surfaces, while shadows spread across the empty plains beneath the mountains. And because almost nothing surrounds the ruins for miles, the tombs almost feel abandoned outside ordinary time itself. Historians believe the Jeddars were built sometime between late antiquity and the early medieval period, likely serving as royal tombs for Berber rulers in North Africa after the decline of Roman control in the region. But many details surrounding them remain uncertain. Who exactly built all of them? How powerful those kingdoms truly were, and why the structures were created in such isolated locations. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Certain tombs contain multiple chambers hidden inside the stone structures themselves. Passageways, burial rooms, and carved interiors remain partially preserved beneath the collapsed rock. Ancient inscriptions and symbols were discovered within some chambers, connecting the tombs to a mixture of local Berber traditions and later cultural influences moving through North Africa during periods of enormous political change. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside them. The structures feel defensive, permanent, almost designed to dominate the empty landscape forever. Ancient rulers wanted their presence visible across the high plains long after death itself. The surrounding mountains deepen everything emotionally. Dry winds move endlessly across the ridges. Storm clouds gather suddenly above the empty valleys. And because the tombs stand isolated across such enormous landscapes, the silence feels almost overwhelming. No crowded tourist cities, no giant modern roads surrounding the ruins, only stone, wind, sky, and forgotten royal monuments slowly eroding beneath centuries of weather. Researchers still debate parts of the tombs today. Some structures show architectural styles, unlike nearby monuments from the same periods. Others contain unusual layouts, and internal chambers difficult to fully study because of collapse and damage over time. The isolation of the site also slowed excavation for generations. Certain sections remain only partially explored even now. The mystery surrounding the tombs only grew larger afterward. Some people believed hidden royal treasures still remain buried beneath collapsed chambers untouched for centuries. Others imagined secret burial tunnels extending beneath the mountains beyond the visible structures. A few believed the Jeddas preserved traces of forgotten kingdoms erased almost completely from recorded history after waves of invasion and empire crossed North Africa. The harsh environment changes everything emotionally. During certain hours, heat and distance blur the landscape itself. The tombs appear almost unreal against the empty plains. Then fog and storms move suddenly through the mountains, changing the atmosphere completely. The ruins never feel stable. They feel ancient, exposed, half forgotten by the world around them. Over centuries, earthquakes, weather, looting, and abandonment damaged many of the structures. Stone collapsed into the burial chambers below. Entire sections disappeared beneath rubble and earth. Yet some tombs still remain standing high above the Algerian plains, where ancient rulers once built giant monuments intended to survive long after their kingdoms disappeared. The giant Buddha carved into a mountain, hidden for centuries. Deep within the cliffs of northwestern China, surrounded by rivers, caves, and towering canyon walls, there is a giant stone figure hidden inside the mountain so enormous that it almost disappears into the landscape itself. Massive cave temples carved into vertical cliffs, ancient statues emerging from solid rock, and a colossal Buddha hidden among the mountains where monks once created entire sacred worlds inside the stone. The place is known as Bingling Temple, and even today, its giant cliffside carvings remain some of the most mysterious religious monuments anywhere in Asia. Because this was not simply a temple, it was an entire mountain transformed into a sacred sanctuary. Bingling Temple lies beside the Yellow River in China's Gansu province, surrounded by steep cliffs, narrow valleys, and dry mountain landscapes stretching endlessly across the horizon. The environment feels isolated immediately. Cold wind moves through the canyon beneath pale skies. River water cuts through the rocky valleys below. And carved directly into the cliff walls themselves, ancient caves and giant statues slowly appear from the stone. The first sight feels emotionally unreal. Hundreds of cave chambers carved high into vertical rock faces, ancient stairways clinging to the mountainside, and towering above everything, a gigantic Buddha figure emerging directly from the cliffs as though the mountain itself became human. The atmosphere surrounding Bingling Temple feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden light moves slowly across the giant stone face while shadows fill the cave chambers carved deep into the cliffs. And because the temples remain surrounded by isolated canyon landscapes, the entire site feels hidden from the modern world. Historians believe monks and artisans began carving sections of Bingling Temple more than 1,500 years ago, during periods when Buddhism spread across ancient China through Silk Road trade routes. Travelers, pilgrims, merchants, and monks crossed enormous deserts and mountains carrying religion, art, and ideas through the region. The mountain sanctuary slowly expanded generation after generation. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient workers carved entire cave temples directly into vertical cliffs using hand tools suspended high above the canyon floor. Inside the caves, walls became covered with statues, paintings, carvings, and sacred figures shaped from the rock itself. Some chambers remain small and silent, others open into enormous sacred spaces hidden inside the mountain. The emotional effect becomes powerful while moving through the site. Narrow walkways cling to the cliff walls above steep drops into the valley below. Ancient caves disappear into darkness beyond carved entrances, and because the mountain constantly surrounds the temples on every side, Visitors almost feel swallowed by the cliffs themselves. The giant Buddha dominates the atmosphere completely. Its enormous figure rises directly from the rock face overlooking the valley beneath the canyon walls. Weather and erosion damaged sections of the statue over centuries, yet the scale still feels overwhelming. Standing beneath it creates the strange sensation of being watched by the mountain itself. The surrounding landscape changes everything emotionally. Dry cliffs rise sharply beside green river water flowing through the valley. Wind echoes through the canyon. Birds move between ancient cave openings high above the ground. And because the region remains so isolated, the sanctuary still feels distant from modern civilization even today. The cave paintings deepen the mystery further. Faded artwork survives across certain walls, showing traces of ancient Buddhist imagery, sacred symbols, and forgotten artistic traditions connected to travellers crossing Asia centuries ago. Some paintings remain barely visible beneath layers of age and dust. Others survived surprisingly intact, hidden inside darker chambers, protected from sunlight and weather. The mountain sanctuary slowly evolved across generations. Different dynasties expanded sections of the caves. New statues appeared beside older carvings. Sacred chambers multiplied across the cliffs, while Buddhism continued spreading throughout the region. The mountain itself became a living religious monument shaped slowly over centuries. Then came abandonment and time. Political instability, changing trade routes, erosion and isolation gradually reduced activity at the sanctuary. Certain caves collapsed. Rockfalls damaged stairways and carvings. Dust and weather covered sections of the ancient artwork hidden inside the mountain chambers. Yet much of the sanctuary survived because of its remoteness. The cliffs protected it, the canyon hid it, and the mountains kept large parts of the sacred complex isolated from the outside world for generations. Some travellers later believed hidden caves still existed farther along the cliffs beyond the known temple chambers. Others imagined sacred relics and ancient manuscripts remained sealed inside collapsed sections of the mountain untouched for centuries. And during quiet evenings, when shadows move across the giant Buddha and wind echoes through the canyon caves, the entire mountain sanctuary barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient fortress city carved into a canyon wall, hidden among the rocky canyons of Georgia, above a quiet river valley surrounded by cliffs and endless wind. There are ruins of an ancient city carved directly into the mountain itself. Massive underground halls hidden inside stone, ancient tunnels disappearing beneath the cliffs, and a fortress city where entire civilizations once lived inside the canyon walls for thousands of years. The place is known as Uplistzike, and even today, it remains one of the strangest ancient settlements ever discovered between Europe and Asia. Because this was not simply a city built beside a mountain. The mountain itself became the city. Uplistzike lies in eastern Georgia beside the Mkvari River, surrounded by dry hills, rocky valleys, and enormous open skies stretching across the Caucasus landscape. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves across the cliffs beneath pale clouds. Dust drifts through broken stone corridors and carved directly into the sandstone hills. Giant cave openings appear one after another across the canyon walls. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Ancient doorways cut into vertical rock. Stone stairways winding through the cliffs. Massive underground chambers hidden inside the mountain where rulers, priests, merchants, and travellers once gathered centuries ago. The atmosphere surrounding the ruins feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden sunlight moves slowly across the sandstone while shadows fill the cave halls and tunnels, carved deep into the mountain itself. And because the city blends naturally into the cliffs, parts of it almost disappear from a distance completely. Historians believe Uplistzike became an important settlement thousands of years ago, long before Christianity spread across Georgia. Its location beside major trade routes made it valuable for civilizations moving between Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. Merchants crossed the valleys, armies passed through the canyons, different cultures left traces across the mountain city generation after generation. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders carved roads, storage chambers, ceremonial halls, stairways, defensive sections, tunnels, and living quarters directly into solid rock using only hand tools. Entire sections of the city were hollowed out from the sandstone cliffs themselves. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Narrow corridors suddenly open into giant halls. Ancient windows overlook the river valley far below. Wind echoes through abandoned chambers where entire communities once lived, hidden inside the canyon walls. The city feels less constructed and more uncovered from the mountain itself. Researchers believe certain sections of List held important religious functions before Christianity reached the region. Ancient pagan rituals likely took place inside ceremonial halls carved into the cliffs centuries before churches appeared nearby. Later, Christian structures were added beside older sacred areas, creating layers of history inside the same mountain city. That mixture still remains visible today. The tunnels deepen the atmosphere further. Some passageways descend beneath the visible city into darker underground sections carved deep inside the rock. Others connect hidden chambers through narrow corridors barely wide enough for a single person to pass. Standing inside them feels unsettling emotionally. Cold air moves through darkness while distant wind echoes from openings farther above. The surrounding landscape changes everything. Dry hills stretch endlessly beyond the canyon beneath shifting skies. The river moves quietly below the cliffs, and because the settlement rises directly from the rock walls, the city feels naturally hidden and defensive, protected from the outside world by geography itself. The upper sections of the fortress deepen the mystery even further. High above the canyon, open platforms overlook enormous distances across the valleys below. From those heights, approaching travellers and armies could be seen long before reaching the settlement itself. That visibility likely made the city extremely difficult to surprise during periods of war. The winds there never stop moving. Air rushes through broken corridors and across exposed stone platforms, carrying dust through the abandoned halls. During storms, dark clouds gather above the canyon while rainwater pours through ancient stairways and tunnels carved centuries earlier. The city transforms completely beneath changing weather. Researchers believe thousands of people may once have lived within the mountain settlement during its peak periods. Homes, workshops, religious chambers, wine storage rooms, gathering spaces and defensive structures spread throughout the cliffs, creating an entire hidden urban world inside the canyon itself. Then came centuries of invasion. Empires crossed the Caucasus repeatedly. Persians, Arabs, Mongols, regional kingdoms fighting for control over the mountain corridors and trade routes surrounding the settlement. Each invasion slowly weakened parts of the city. Fires damaged ancient halls, earthquakes cracked the sandstone cliffs, and erosion gradually wore away exposed chambers year after year. The Mongol invasions especially devastated many sections of the region. Trade declined, political power shifted elsewhere, and gradually, the giant canyon city lost importance while populations moved toward newer settlements beyond the cliffs. Some chambers collapsed entirely into the valley below. Others remained abandoned for generations, slowly filling with dust and silence. Rainwater carved through ancient stairways while wind moved endlessly through empty ceremonial halls where rulers and priests once stood centuries earlier. The mountain slowly reclaimed parts of the city itself. The ancient stone city hidden beneath the Sahara. Deep within the Sahara Desert, far beyond the last villages, roads and rivers, there are ruins of an ancient stone city abandoned in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Broken towers rising from endless sand, ancient homes slowly collapsing beneath desert wind, and the remains of a forgotten settlement hidden so deep inside the Sahara that for centuries almost nobody outside the region even knew it existed. The place is known as Jardo, and even today, its ruined stone cities remain some of the most isolated and mysterious ancient settlements anywhere in Africa. Because this was not simply a desert village, it was an entire civilization surviving at the edge of the Sahara itself. Jardo lies in northeastern Niger, surrounded by enormous sand seas, rocky desert plains, and endless silence stretching toward the horizon. The environment feels unreal immediately. Hot wind moves across empty dunes beneath pale skies. Dust drifts through abandoned stone corridors, and rising from the desert itself. The ruins appear almost like mirages against the sand. The first sight feels emotionally haunting. Tall mud brick and stone structures standing half-collapsed beneath centuries of heat and erosion. Ancient alleyways disappearing between ruined walls. Empty buildings overlooking one of the most isolated landscapes on Earth. The atmosphere surrounding Jardo feels deeply unsettling, especially during sunset. Golden light moves across the abandoned ruins while long shadows stretch across the empty desert floor. And because absolutely nothing surrounds the city for enormous distances, the silence feels almost unnatural. Historians believe Djado once stood along important trans-Saharan trade routes, connecting regions of North and West Africa centuries ago. Caravans carrying salt, gold, goods and supplies likely crossed these brutal desert corridors for generations. The settlement became a survival point within the endless Sahara. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Entire neighbourhoods of stone and mud brick structures still remain standing despite centuries of abandonment. Watchtowers overlook the surrounding dunes. Storage rooms, living quarters, and defensive walls spread across the ruined settlement. The emotional effect becomes powerful while moving through the empty streets. Doorways open into collapsed chambers filled with sand. Wind moves through ruined corridors where people once lived, traded and survived in extreme desert isolation. The city feels frozen in time. Researchers believe the harsh environment eventually became impossible for long-term survival after water sources declined and trade routes shifted elsewhere across the Sahara. Without reliable water, the settlement slowly emptied while the desert reclaimed the city itself. That disappearance transformed Djado into something almost ghost-like. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. No forests, no rivers, no modern cities nearby, only endless deserts stretching beneath enormous skies. During storms, wind covers sections of the ruins beneath moving sand while heat distorts the horizon itself. The city almost appears swallowed by the Sahara in slow motion. The towers deepen the atmosphere further. Some still stand above the ruins despite centuries of abandonment. Others partially collapsed into giant piles of broken earth and stone. From higher sections of the city, the surrounding desert looks endless in every direction. That isolation likely shaped every part of life there. Food, water, survival, and trade all depended on dangerous movement across one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. Then gradually, the caravans stopped coming. Trade routes moved elsewhere. Water became more difficult to reach, and the ancient desert city slowly faded into silence, while sand drifted through the abandoned streets year after year. Certain structures collapsed completely beneath erosion and storms. Others survived surprisingly intact, protected by the dry desert climate. Even now, large sections remain isolated far beyond normal travel routes across the Sahara. Some travellers later believed hidden chambers and underground storage areas still remained buried beneath the dunes surrounding the ruins. Others imagined forgotten trade treasures were left behind somewhere inside the abandoned city when the population disappeared, and, during quiet evenings, when desert wind moves through the broken towers and shadows cover the empty streets, Djado barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient circular city hidden in Russia's empty steppe, deep within the grasslands of southern Russia, surrounded by endless plains and enormous skies, there are ruins of an ancient settlement so unusual that archaeologists compared it to something far ahead of its time. Perfect circular walls built thousands of years ago, ancient streets arranged with strange precision, and a mysterious Bronze Age city hidden beneath the earth for centuries before its accidental discovery shocked researchers completely. The place is known as Archaeum, and even today, it remains one of the strangest archaeological discoveries ever uncovered in the Eurasian steppe. Because this was not simply another ancient village, it was a carefully planned circular city built in the middle of nowhere long before most people imagined such engineering existed there. Archaeum lies near the southern Ural Mountains, surrounded by open grasslands stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The environment feels isolated immediately. Cold wind moves across the steppe beneath enormous skies. Dry grass bends across empty plains, and hidden beneath the earth itself, the ancient circular settlement slowly emerged after remaining buried for thousands of years. The first sight feels emotionally strange. Unlike ruined temples or giant pyramids, Archaeum appears geometric, organised, almost unnatural against the open landscape. Two giant circular walls once surrounded the city with carefully planned entrances, streets, homes, drainage systems and defensive structures arranged with astonishing precision. The atmosphere surrounding the ruins feels deeply surreal, especially during sunrise. Golden light spreads across the grasslands while fog drifts slowly above the buried foundations. And because the steppe stretches endlessly in every direction, the ancient city almost feels isolated outside ordinary history itself. Historians believe Archaeum was built during the Bronze Age more than 4,000 years ago by ancient steppe cultures connected to what archaeologists now call the Sintashta culture. The settlement likely functioned as both fortress and community during a period when metalworking, trade, ritual and warfare were rapidly transforming societies across Eurasia. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Researchers discovered evidence of advanced planning rarely associated with settlements from that era in the region. Homes arranged in organised circles, complex drainage systems, defensive walls, central gathering spaces, and evidence of metallurgy connected to early bronze production. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing within the ruins. Everything feels intentional, measured, designed according to a plan rather than expanding randomly over time. The city almost resembles a giant wheel pressed into the earth itself. The circular layout deepens the atmosphere further, ancient streets curved around the settlement, connecting homes and communal areas inside the fortified walls. Some researchers believe the design may have held spiritual or astronomical significance beyond ordinary defense and organization. That possibility transformed Archaeum into one of Russia's most debated ancient sites. The surrounding steppe changes everything emotionally. No forests, no mountains surrounding the city directly, only enormous open plains beneath endless skies. During storms, dark clouds move across the grasslands while wind races through the empty landscape exactly as it did thousands of years ago. The isolation feels enormous. Researchers also discovered evidence of fire within the ruins. At some point, the settlement appears to have burned. Whether through attack, ritual destruction, accident or abandonment still remains debated. That destruction preserved parts of the city beneath layers of earth and ash for thousands of years. The mystery only deepened after rediscovery, because Archaeum was not discovered during famous ancient exploration. It was found accidentally during Soviet-era surveys before a reservoir project nearly flooded the entire site forever. Archaeologists rushed to study the settlement before it disappeared beneath water. Instead, the discovery transformed into one of the most important archaeological sites in Russia. The engineering surprised researchers enormously. Ancient people living on the Eurasian steppe thousands of years ago were suddenly shown, capable of organised urban planning, metalworking, defensive architecture, and large-scale settlement design far more advanced than many expected. That realisation changed how archaeologists viewed entire ancient cultures across the region. Over time, stranger theories inevitably appeared. Some people believed Archaeum represented the remains of a lost advanced civilization erased from mainstream history. Others imagined the circular city aligned with celestial movements and astronomical patterns connected to forgotten rituals. A few even claimed the settlement held mystical energy because of its unusual layout and isolated location across the open steppe. Today, parts of the ancient walls and foundations still remain visible beneath the grasslands, where an organised Bronze Age city once stood thousands of years before disappearing beneath the earth and silence. The ancient stone tomb, built with a floating capstone, hidden within the rocky landscapes of Western Ireland, surrounded by wind, grasslands and endless grey skies, there stands an ancient stone tomb so strange that it almost looks impossible. A giant stone slab balanced above the earth. Massive standing rocks holding enormous weight for thousands of years. And a prehistoric monument built long before metal tools, modern engineering, or written history existed in Ireland. The place is known as Pulnabron Dolmen, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious stone tombs anywhere in Europe. Because this was not simply a grave, it was a monument ancient people intentionally raised against the sky itself. Pulnabron stands in the Burren region of Western Ireland, surrounded by limestone fields, rocky hills, and cold Atlantic wind moving endlessly across the landscape. The environment feels ancient immediately. Grey stone stretches across the ground in every direction. Mist drifts beneath heavy clouds, and standing alone among the barren terrain, the giant dolmen rises from the earth exactly where ancient builders placed it thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Two tall, upright stones supporting a massive flat capstone suspended above the ground. The structure almost appears fragile, as though the enormous stone should collapse at any moment. Yet somehow, it remained standing for over 5,000 years. The atmosphere surrounding the tomb feels deeply strange, especially during early morning fog. Mist moves slowly across the limestone fields while wind echoes around the standing stones. And because the monument stands completely exposed against the open landscape, it almost feels separated from the modern world entirely. Historians believe Polnabrone was built during the Neolithic period, making it older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids of Egypt. Ancient farming communities likely used the structure as a burial site, where human remains, objects, and ceremonial offerings were placed beneath the giant capstone. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. The upper stone weighs several tons. Ancient builders somehow lifted and balanced it onto the upright stones without cranes, metal machinery, or advanced tools. That achievement alone still fascinates archaeologists today. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beneath the monument. The structure feels intentional beyond practicality. The tomb was designed to be seen, to rise against the sky and dominate the barren landscape surrounding it. Researchers later discovered human remains buried beneath the dolmen, including adults, children, and artifacts connected to ancient life in prehistoric Ireland. Stone tools, jewellery, fragments of ritual activity preserved beneath the earth for thousands of years. The surrounding barren landscape deepens everything emotionally. The ground itself looks almost alien. Huge limestone slabs cover the hills beneath endless wind and changing weather. Very few trees grow there, only stone, grass, fog, and silence. The monument feels perfectly matched to the harsh landscape around it. The isolation likely carried spiritual meaning. Ancient people may have viewed the rocky hills as sacred or connected to death, ancestors, and the natural world. The dolmen became part tomb, part ritual monument, part territorial marker standing above the land itself. Then came thousands of years of weather. Storms crossed the Atlantic, rain eroded the limestone, civilizations rose and disappeared across Ireland. Yet the giant capstone somehow remained balanced above the earth through all of it. The mystery surrounding the monument only deepened afterward. Because structures like Polnabrone appear across different parts of Europe, created by prehistoric people separated by enormous distances. Similar stone tombs emerged in distant regions long before fast travel or written communication existed. That pattern still raises questions about how ancient knowledge spread across prehistoric Europe. Some people later believed the dolmen marked sacred energy points connected to ancient spiritual traditions. Others imagined hidden chambers still existed somewhere beneath the surrounding limestone fields, untouched for thousands of years, and during quiet evenings, when cold wind moves through the burren and shadows stretch across the ancient stones. The giant capstone almost appears to float silently above the Irish landscape exactly as it did 5,000 years ago. The underground ritual halls hidden beneath Turkey. Deep within the dry landscapes of southeastern Turkey, beyond empty plains, ancient ruins, and forgotten villages, there are underground chambers carved into stone where mysterious rituals once took place beneath the earth itself. Ancient tunnels disappearing into darkness, massive carved halls hidden below the surface, and strange sacred chambers connected to stars, gods, and ancient ceremonies long forgotten by history. The place is known as Somatar, and even today, it remains one of the strangest ritual sites hidden in the ancient Middle East. Because this was not simply a village. It was a sacred landscape built around underground worship and celestial mystery. Somatar lies in southeastern Turkey, surrounded by rocky hills, dry grasslands, and isolated plains stretching beneath enormous skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across empty valleys beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts through broken ruins and weathered stone, and hidden among the hills themselves, ancient entrances descend underground into chambers carved directly into the earth. The first sight feels emotionally strange. Stone openings disappearing beneath the ground, ancient carved rooms hidden beneath barren hills, a mysterious inscription still visible across the rock after centuries of abandonment and erosion. The atmosphere surrounding the site feels deeply unsettling, especially during evening. Long shadows stretch across the plains while darkness slowly fills the underground corridors beneath the ruins. And because the surrounding landscape feels so isolated, the chambers almost seem disconnected from the modern world entirely. Historians believe Somatar became an important religious centre during ancient Mesopotamian and Roman era periods. The site likely connected to celestial worship focused on planetary gods, and ancient belief systems tied to the movement of stars across the night sky. That connection transformed the settlement into something more than ordinary ruins. It became a sacred ceremonial landscape built between earth and sky. The underground halls deepen the mystery enormously. Ancient chambers carved into the rock contain niches, inscriptions, altars, and ritual spaces hidden beneath the surface. Some rooms feel narrow and claustrophobic. Others suddenly open into larger halls where ceremonies and gatherings may once have taken place. The emotional effect becomes powerful while descending underground. The temperature changes immediately. Wind disappears. Silence replaces the open plains above, and inside the chambers, darkness surrounds everything, except narrow beams of light entering through ancient openings carved into the stone. Researchers discovered inscriptions written in ancient Syriac and references connected to moon gods and planetary worship. That detail adds another layer of mystery. Ancient people may have travelled enormous distances to reach these isolated ritual halls hidden beneath the Turkish plains. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dry hills stretch endlessly beneath changing skies. Ancient ruins remain scattered across the region, and because the site sits far from large modern cities, the silence feels enormous. At night, the atmosphere transforms completely. The plains become almost black beneath endless stars, and suddenly, the ancient connection between the underground chambers and celestial worship feels easier to understand. The caves and ritual halls likely symbolize separation from ordinary life, a descent beneath the earth before returning again beneath the night sky. That symbolic journey may have formed part of ceremonies performed there centuries ago. Then came gradual abandonment. Trade routes changed, empires collapsed, religions transformed across the region, and slowly, the sacred halls beneath Somatar fell silent while wind and dust covered the surface ruins above. Certain chambers collapsed, others remained hidden underground for generations. Even now, parts of the site remain quiet and isolated compared to larger archaeological locations across Turkey. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still extended farther beneath the hills beyond the known chambers. Others imagined ancient priests preserved sacred astronomical knowledge somewhere inside sealed underground rooms untouched for centuries. And, during quiet nights, when cold wind moves across the empty plains above the buried ritual halls, Somatar still feels like a place where ancient people once descended beneath the earth, searching for something connected to the stars above them. The stone palace, built with giant animal guardians. Hidden among the valleys of Jordan, surrounded by dry hills, olive trees, and ancient ruins, there stands the remains of a strange stone palace unlike almost anything else in the ancient Middle East. Massive carved lions emerging from giant stone walls, ancient underground chambers hidden beneath the structure, and a mysterious palace built from enormous limestone blocks beside quiet, flowing water. The place is known as Qasr al-Abd, and even today, it remains one of the strangest ancient palaces ever built in Jordan, because this was not simply a royal residence, it was a monument designed to overwhelm anyone who approached it. Qasr al-Abd lies near the ancient region of Iraq al-Amir, surrounded by hills, caves, and fertile valleys west of Amman. The environment feels peaceful immediately. Warm wind moves across green fields beneath pale skies. Water flows quietly through the valley, and rising from the landscape itself, the giant stone ruins appear almost isolated from the modern world around them. The first sight feels emotionally strange. Huge limestone blocks stacked into the remains of a massive rectangular palace, broken columns scattered across the ground and carved directly into the stone walls, giant animal reliefs staring outward from the ruins. The atmosphere surrounding the palace feels deeply unusual, especially during late afternoon. Golden sunlight moves across weathered carvings, while shadows slowly fill the lower chambers beneath the structure. And because the palace stands alone within the valley, the ruins almost feel disconnected from ordinary history. Historians believe Qasr al-Abd was constructed more than 2,000 years ago, during the Hellenistic period, likely connected to a powerful local ruler named Hyrcanus of the Tobiad family. The palace became part of a wealthy estate influenced by both local traditions and Greek architectural styles, spreading through the region after the campaigns of Alexander the Great. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders used gigantic limestone blocks, weighing many tons to create the palace walls and foundations. Some sections feel oversized compared to ordinary buildings from the same era. The structure almost resembles a fortress mixed with a ceremonial palace. The giant animal carvings deepen the atmosphere further. Lions, leopards, and other creatures emerge from the stone walls in massive reliefs, carved directly into the palace exterior. Certain figures appear almost protective, guarding the structure itself. Others seem decorative yet strangely intimidating against the quiet valley landscape. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Broken stairways lead toward collapsed upper levels. Dark chambers remain hidden beneath the palace floor, and because much of the structure survived only partially, visitors move through fragments of something that once must have felt enormous. Researchers believe water likely played an important role in the palace design. Some theories suggest parts of the lower structure may have interacted with pools or flowing water surrounding the building during its original construction. That possibility changes the atmosphere emotionally. The palace may have reflected sunlight and water together beneath the valley cliffs, creating an almost dreamlike appearance. The surrounding landscape deepens everything. Ancient caves remain carved into nearby hillsides where earlier communities once lived. Olive trees and dry valleys stretch across the region beneath changing skies. And because the palace stands away from major urban ruins, the isolation makes the structure feel even stranger. Then came destruction. Earthquakes likely damaged major sections of the palace before construction was ever fully completed. Walls collapsed, upper floors disappeared, and over centuries, the once grand structure slowly became ruins scattered across the valley floor. Large stone blocks fell into broken piles beneath erosion and time, yet parts of the giant animal carvings still survived, watching silently across the landscape, exactly where ancient sculptors created them centuries ago. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still existed somewhere beneath the ruined palace, untouched for generations. Others imagined treasures connected to ancient rulers remained buried beneath collapsed sections of the structure, and during quiet evenings, when shadows move across the giant stone animals and wind echoes through the empty ruins, Qasr al-Abd barely feels like an ordinary palace at all. The ancient pyramid hills hidden beneath Peru, high in the Andes of Peru, surrounded by mountains, grasslands, and cold rivers flowing through ancient valleys. There are strange hills rising from the earth that many people once believed were completely natural. But beneath the grass and soil, enormous man-made structures were hiding there the entire time. Ancient pyramid mounds buried beneath centuries of earth. Massive ceremonial platforms disappearing into the landscape, and forgotten ruins hidden so deeply that the mountains themselves almost swallowed them completely. The place is connected to the ancient pyramid mounds near Andahuaylilas, and even today, the strange buried structures remain some of the least understood ancient sites in the Peruvian highlands, because these were not ordinary hills, they were monuments slowly consumed by time itself. The region of Andahuaylilas lies within the Andes, surrounded by steep mountains, dry valleys, and enormous skies stretching across southern Peru. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves through open grasslands beneath shifting clouds. Rivers cut through narrow valleys far below the hills, and scattered across the landscape. Large rounded mounds rise quietly from the earth, almost blending into the natural terrain. The first sight feels emotionally strange. Nothing immediately looks artificial. The hills appear ordinary at first glance, but slowly, geometric shapes begin to emerge beneath the vegetation. Long stone alignments hidden beneath grass, terraced slopes too symmetrical to feel natural, and sections of buried walls appearing where erosion exposed the earth underneath. The atmosphere surrounding the mounds feels deeply mysterious, especially during early morning fog. Mist drifts across the hills while silence covers the valley beneath grey skies, and because the structures remain partially buried beneath nature itself, the ruins almost feel undiscovered even when standing directly beside them. Historians believe the region surrounding Andahuaylilas held importance for ancient Andean civilizations long before the rise of the Inca Empire. Communities built ceremonial centers, agricultural systems, and sacred sites throughout the highlands for centuries. The pyramid mounds likely formed part of those older forgotten landscapes. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Certain mounds rise high above the surrounding terrain, suggesting enormous amounts of labour were required to construct them. Stone retaining walls and terraced sections remain partially visible beneath erosion. Researchers believe many structures were intentionally layered with earth over generations, slowly transforming monumental architecture into artificial hills. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the landscape. The ruins do not dominate the environment like giant Egyptian pyramids or towering temples. Instead, they hide within the mountains, half natural, half artificial. The boundary between human construction and landscape almost disappears completely. The surrounding Andes deepen everything emotionally. Snow-covered peaks rise in the distance beyond dry valleys and ancient fields. Storm clouds move quickly across the mountains, while sunlight shifts constantly over the buried structures. And because the region remains quieter than Peru's famous tourist sites, the atmosphere still feels isolated and untouched. Researchers believe many ancient Andean cultures viewed mountains themselves as sacred living forces connected to gods, ancestors, and spiritual power. That belief may explain why ceremonial structures were often designed to blend into the landscape rather than dominate it completely. The pyramid mounds became part of the mountains themselves. The mystery surrounding the site only grew larger over time, because unlike famous ruins uncovered clearly above the ground, these structures remained hidden beneath earth and vegetation for centuries. Some locals passed the hills daily without realizing ancient architecture existed beneath them. Only careful study revealed traces of buried walls, platforms, and human construction hidden below the surface. Then came centuries of abandonment. Civilizations changed across the Andes. The Inca Empire rose and later collapsed after Spanish conquest swept through Peru. And gradually, the ancient pyramid hills faded into silence, while grass, wind, and erosion slowly covered more of the structures beneath the earth. Some sections collapsed entirely. Others survived buried beneath layers of soil and vegetation. Even now, researchers continue debating how extensive certain hidden structures beneath the region truly are. Some believe larger ceremonial complexes still remain buried beneath unexplored hills nearby. Others imagine entire forgotten settlements once surrounded the pyramid mounds, before disappearing into the landscape over centuries. And during quiet evenings, when fog moves slowly across the Andean valleys and shadows cover the buried hills, the ancient structures almost vanish back into the mountains once again. The giant rock face hidden in China's mountains. Deep within the mountains of southern China, surrounded by forests, rivers, and endless cliffs, there is a gigantic rock formation so unusual that people believe it resembles the face of a sleeping human emerging from the earth itself. A massive stone profile staring toward the sky, ancient legends connected to the mountain, and a natural formation so strange that it barely looks real from a distance. The place is known as the Guizhou stone face, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious natural formations hidden within China's remote mountain landscapes. Because this is not simply a cliff, it is a mountain that appears almost human. The stone face lies within Guizhou province, surrounded by steep green valleys, rivers, dense forests, and enormous karst mountains rising across the landscape. The environment feels dreamlike immediately. Mist drifts between the cliffs beneath pale skies. Rain moves slowly across the mountains, and hidden among the valleys. The giant stone profile slowly appears through the fog. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. From certain angles, the mountain resembles the face of a giant sleeping human carved directly into the earth. A forehead, a nose, closed eyes, even the outline of lips and a chin becoming visible against the sky. The scale feels overwhelming. The face stretches across enormous sections of the mountainside, towering above the forests below. The atmosphere surrounding the formation feels deeply strange, especially during fog. Clouds move across the stone profile while shadows shift slowly over the cliffs, making the face appear almost alive for brief moments. And because the surrounding valleys remain quiet and isolated, the mountain barely feels connected to the modern world. The mystery surrounding the stone face grew quickly after photographs of the formation spread across China. Many people believed the resemblance looked too perfect to be accidental. Others connected the mountain to local myths and spiritual traditions tied to sacred landscapes throughout the region. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing below the cliffs. The human mind naturally searches for patterns and faces in the environment, yet the scale of this formation makes the illusion feel unusually convincing. especially at sunrise or sunset when changing light sharpens the profile against the sky. The surrounding mountains deepen everything emotionally. Guizhou's landscape is filled with giant limestone cliffs, hidden caves, underground rivers, and isolated valleys shaped by millions of years of erosion. Entire mountains rise through the mist like islands above the forests. The region already feels mysterious before the stone face even appears. Researchers explain the formation as a result of natural erosion, geological layering, and the unique karst landscapes common throughout southern China. Wind, rain, vegetation, and time slowly shape the cliffs into forms that accidentally resemble human features when viewed from specific angles. Yet, emotionally, the formation still feels strange, almost intentional. The mountain changes constantly depending on weather and light. During heavy mist, only parts of the face remain visible through the clouds. At sunset, shadows deepen the eyes and mouth across the cliffs, and after rain, dark stone contrasts sharply against the surrounding greenery, making the profile appear even clearer. That shifting appearance helped fuel stories surrounding the mountain. Some locals believe the giant face represented an ancient sleeping guardian watching over the valleys. Others imagined forgotten civilizations once considered the mountain sacred because of its human appearance. A few believed hidden caves beneath the cliffs contained ancient temples or ritual spaces connected to the formation itself. The caves surrounding the region deepen the atmosphere further. Guizhou contains enormous underground cave systems stretching beneath the mountains for miles. Dark tunnels disappear beneath rivers and cliffs throughout the landscape. Some remain unexplored even today. That hidden underground world adds another layer of mystery to the giant stone face above. The isolation changes everything emotionally. Unlike famous landmarks surrounded by modern development, the Guizhou Mountains still feel remote. Villages remain, scattered between valleys while fog covers enormous sections of the landscape for much of the year. The mountains themselves dominate everything. Then slowly, weather changes the atmosphere once again. Clouds drift across the cliffs. The giant face fades partially into mist, and for brief moments, the mountain almost disappears completely back into the landscape surrounding it. The ancient fortress hidden inside a volcanic crater. Far out in the Pacific Ocean, on one of the most isolated inhabited islands on Earth, there are ruins of an ancient stone village built beside the edge of a giant volcanic crater overlooking the sea. Collapsed stone houses facing endless ocean cliffs, ancient ceremonial platforms hidden among volcanic rock, and a fortress-like settlement built in one of the most remote places humans ever reached in the ancient world. The place is known as Orongo near the crater of Ranokau, and even today, it remains one of the strangest ancient sites anywhere in the Pacific, because this was not simply a village. It was a ceremonial stronghold built at the edge of a volcano above the ocean itself. Ranokau rises on Easter Island surrounded by steep cliffs, volcanic grasslands, and endless water stretching toward the horizon in every direction. The environment feels unreal immediately. Cold wind moves across volcanic stone beneath grey skies. Waves crash thousands of feet below the cliffs, and beside the giant crater itself, ancient stone ruins appear silently against the grass-covered slopes. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Dozens of low stone structures built from dark volcanic rock, narrow doorways facing the sea, ancient ceremonial areas overlooking dangerous cliffs dropping directly into the Pacific Ocean below. The atmosphere surrounding the settlement feels deeply isolated, especially during fog or storms. Clouds drift across the crater rim, while ocean wind moves endlessly through the abandoned stone village. And because the island itself sits so far from other civilizations, the ruins almost feel disconnected from the rest of human history entirely. Historians believe Orongo became an important ceremonial centre, connected to the Birdman cult that emerged after the earlier era of giant Moai statue construction on Easter Island. The settlement likely hosted religious ceremonies, competitions and rituals tied to leadership and survival on the isolated island. The crater deepens the mystery enormously. Ranokau itself contains a massive freshwater crater lake, hidden inside the volcano, surrounded by steep walls covered in vegetation. From the village above, the crater appears almost like another world hidden within the mountain itself. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing near the cliffs. On one side, endless ocean. On the other, the giant volcanic crater descending into silence below. The settlement feels trapped between sea and volcano. The stone houses deepen the atmosphere further. Ancient builders constructed long, low buildings from volcanic slabs, fitted tightly together against the harsh wind sweeping across the cliffs. The entrances remain unusually small, forcing people to crawl partially into certain structures. That design likely helped protect against weather and powerful ocean winds. Researchers believe the Birdman ceremonies connected to dangerous competitions held on the cliffs below the village. Participants climbed down steep volcanic walls toward the ocean before swimming to nearby rocky islets, searching for the first egg of migratory seabirds. The winner became connected to sacred political and spiritual authority for the year. That ritual transformed the volcanic settlement into something far more than an ordinary village. The surrounding landscape changes everything emotionally. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly beneath enormous skies. Storms move across the water without interruption. And because Easter Island remains one of the most isolated places on Earth, the feeling of distance becomes overwhelming. The volcanic cliffs themselves deepen the mystery. Sharp black rock formations rise beside crashing waves far below the settlement. Caves and hidden pathways cut through sections of the crater slopes, and during heavy mist, the entire village almost disappears into the volcanic landscape surrounding it. Then came gradual decline. Population struggles, environmental change, outside contact and later colonial disruption transformed life on the island permanently. Ancient ceremonial systems weakened. The stone village slowly emptied. And over time, wind and weather moved through the abandoned structures beside the crater cliffs. Grass-covered sections of the ruins, stone walls collapsed, yet much of Orongo survived because of its remote volcanic location high above the ocean. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels extended beneath the crater slopes, connecting secret ceremonial chambers below the village. Others imagined ancient priests once used the volcanic crater itself for rituals tied to stars, spirits, and the dangerous ocean surrounding the island. And during quiet evenings, when fog moves across the crater rim and waves crash beneath the cliffs below, the ancient stone village barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The megalithic tomb hidden in Algeria's empty mountains. Deep within the mountains of northern Algeria, surrounded by dry hills, ancient valleys, and endless silence, there stands a giant circular tomb built from enormous stone blocks long before modern history reached the region. Massive columns rising from a lonely hillside, ancient burial chambers hidden beneath layers of stone, and a mysterious monument so old that even historians still debate exactly who first built it. The place is known as the Medresin Tomb, and even today it remains one of the strangest megalithic structures anywhere in North Africa. Because this was not simply a grave, it was a giant royal monument raised against the mountains themselves. The Medresin stands in northeastern Algeria, surrounded by rocky plains, dry grasslands, and distant mountain ridges stretching beneath enormous skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across the hills beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts between broken stones and dry earth, and rising alone from the landscape itself, the giant circular structure dominates the empty valley exactly where ancient builders placed it thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. A massive stone mound surrounded by towering columns, fitted together in a giant ring. The structure almost resembles a fortress mixed with a pyramid. Weathered stone blocks rise above the earth while shadows fall across hidden entrances leading into darkness below. The atmosphere surrounding the tomb feels deeply isolated, especially during sunset. Golden light moves slowly across the ancient stones while silence spreads across the empty hills beneath darkening skies. And because almost nothing modern surrounds the monument, the tomb feels disconnected from ordinary time itself. Historians believe the Medresin became a royal mausoleum connected to ancient Numidian rulers long before Roman control spread fully across North Africa. The Numidians built powerful kingdoms across the region and became famous for cavalry, warfare, and alliances with larger Mediterranean empires including Carthage and Rome. Yet large parts of their early history still remain uncertain. That uncertainty deepens the mystery enormously. The scale of the structure feels astonishing emotionally. Ancient builders somehow transported and positioned enormous stone blocks into a perfectly balanced circular monument centuries before modern machinery existed in the region. The tomb rises more than 60 feet high with giant columns surrounding its exterior walls. The engineering alone still fascinates archaeologists today. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside it. The monument was designed to dominate the surrounding landscape, visible across the valleys beneath the mountains, permanent, heavy, almost intimidating against the empty terrain around it. Researchers believe burial chambers remain hidden inside the structure, connected through narrow internal passages beneath the stone mound. Certain sections were damaged over centuries by looting, weather and collapse. Yet the giant monument survived surprisingly intact compared to many ancient North African ruins. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dry mountains stretch endlessly beyond the tomb beneath changing skies. Storm clouds gather suddenly across the valleys, and because the structure stands alone across the hills, the silence feels enormous. No large cities, no crowded tourist roads, only wind, stone, and one of the oldest royal tombs in Algeria, slowly weathering beneath the desert air. The monument also reveals something important about forgotten African kingdoms, often overshadowed by larger empires surrounding them. Long before full Roman domination, powerful civilizations already existed across North Africa, building monumental architecture, royal cities, and military kingdoms across enormous territories. The Medresin became one surviving fragment of that world. Then came centuries of change. Empires crossed North Africa repeatedly. Romans expanded across the region. Later kingdoms rose and collapsed. Trade routes shifted through the mountains and deserts, and gradually, the giant royal tomb became an isolated ruin standing alone above the valleys while history moved elsewhere. Sections of stone collapsed. Certain carvings disappeared beneath erosion. Yet the enormous circular structure remained, watching silently across the hills, where ancient rulers were once buried beneath the mountain sky. Some travellers later believed hidden chambers still existed somewhere deep inside the monument, untouched for centuries. Others imagined royal treasures remained sealed beneath collapsed passages beneath the stone mound. And during quiet evenings, when wind moves through the ancient columns and shadows spread across the empty Algerian hills, the Medresin tomb barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The giant temple ruins, hidden in Pakistan's mountains. High in the mountains of northern Pakistan, surrounded by rocky valleys, dry hills, and ancient trade routes, there are ruins of a massive stone monastery hidden above the plains where monks once built one of the great spiritual centres of the ancient world. Endless stone stairways climbing the hillsides, ancient meditation chambers hidden among the ruins, and giant temple structures abandoned quietly beneath centuries of wind and silence. The place is known as Takhti Bahi, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious ancient Buddhist sites anywhere in South Asia. Because this was not simply a monastery. It was an entire sacred city built high above the surrounding world. Takhti Bahi stands in modern-day Pakistan, surrounded by rugged hills, dry valleys, and distant mountain ranges stretching beneath enormous skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves through broken stone corridors beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts across ancient stairways carved into the hillside, and rising above the valley itself, the ruined monastery spreads across the mountain like a forgotten fortress. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive stone walls climbing steep hills, ancient courtyards connected by narrow stairways, meditation chambers, temples, and gathering halls scattered across the rocky slopes. The ruins feel isolated from the modern world around them. The atmosphere surrounding Takhti Bahi feels deeply peaceful, especially during early morning. Golden light moves slowly across weathered stone while silence fills the empty monastery courtyards. And because the complex sits high above the surrounding plains, the site almost feels suspended between earth and sky. Historians believe Takhti Bahi became an important Buddhist monastic centre nearly 2,000 years ago, during periods when Buddhism spread widely across ancient Gandhara. The region connected major trade routes linking India, Central Asia, Persia, and beyond. Travellers, merchants, monks, and pilgrims likely crossed enormous distances to reach the mountain sanctuary. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders constructed temples, assembly halls, meditation cells, courtyards, stupas, and ritual spaces directly into the steep mountain slopes. Everything was carefully arranged across terraces climbing the hillside. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Stone stairways rise unexpectedly toward hidden courtyards. Dark chambers open into silent meditation rooms where monks once lived in isolation. Wind echoes softly through empty corridors worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The monastery feels less like a ruin and more like an abandoned world frozen in stone. Researchers believe the elevated mountain location was chosen intentionally. The isolation offered protection from invasion and distraction, while creating an environment suited for meditation and spiritual study, far above crowded settlements below. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dry hills stretch endlessly toward distant mountains beneath shifting skies. Storm clouds move across the valleys during monsoon season, while sunlight suddenly breaks across the stone terraces. And because the monastery rises directly from the hillside, the entire complex blends naturally into the mountain itself. The stupas deepen the atmosphere further. Ancient domed religious monuments still stand among the ruins surrounded by collapsed walls and broken courtyards. Certain sections remain surprisingly preserved despite centuries of weather and abandonment. The silence around them feels enormous. Takti Bahi also survived partly because of its remote location. While many ancient cities across the region were destroyed, rebuilt, or swallowed by expanding settlements, the mountain monastery remained relatively isolated above the plains. That isolation protected large sections of the ruins for generations. Then slowly, the world around it changed. Political power shifted across the region. Trade routes transformed. Buddhism gradually declined in parts of the area while newer religious and political systems spread through the valleys below. And over time, the giant monastery slowly emptied. Stone stairways cracked beneath erosion. Courtyards filled with dust and silence. Entire sections of the complex collapsed into the mountain slopes. Yet much of the sacred city still survived high above the valleys, where monks once built one of the great spiritual centres of the ancient Gandhara world. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still existed beneath the monastery terraces untouched for centuries. Others imagined ancient manuscripts or sacred relics remained sealed inside collapsed meditation halls somewhere within the ruins. And during quiet evenings, when wind moves through the empty courtyards and shadows spread slowly across the mountain monastery, Takti Bahi barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient fortress walls hidden in Iran's desert. Deep within the deserts of southeastern Iran, surrounded by palm groves, dry mountains, and endless walls of earth-coloured stone, there are ruins of a giant fortress city so enormous that it once looked like an entire civilization rising from the desert itself. Massive defensive walls stretching across the landscape, ancient towers overlooking empty plains, and a fortress built so large that thousands of people once lived safely behind its walls. The place is known as the Bam Citadel, Archaeological, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary fortress ruins ever built in the ancient world. Because this was not simply a castle, it was an entire city hidden inside a fortress. Archaeological stands in Iran's Kerman province surrounded by desert plains, distant mountains, and ancient trade routes that once connected Persia with lands far beyond the horizon. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across dry earth beneath pale skies. Dust drifts between ruined walls and empty streets, and rising above the desert itself, the giant citadel dominates the landscape like a sand-coloured mountain built by human hands. The first sight feels emotionally unreal. Endless walls made from mud brick, watchtowers standing above ancient streets, layers of fortifications climbing toward a central stronghold high above the city below. From a distance, the ruins almost resemble a giant sculpture emerging from the desert floor. The atmosphere surrounding Bam feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads across the mud brick walls while long shadows stretch through abandoned streets. And because nearly everything shares the same earth-coloured tones, the city almost appears blended into the desert itself. Historians believe the origins of Bam reach back many centuries, with the fortress expanding across different dynasties and periods of Persian history. The city became especially important because of its position along major trade routes connected to the Silk Road. Merchants crossed deserts carrying silk, spices, textiles, and goods from distant civilizations. Travellers arrived from different regions of Asia and the Middle East, and protected behind enormous walls, Bam grew into a thriving fortified city. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Unlike ordinary castles built only for soldiers and rulers, Bam contained homes, markets, workshops, mosques, storage areas, military sections and entire neighbourhoods spread across the fortified complex. It functioned like a complete city enclosed behind defensive walls. The emotional effect becomes powerful while moving through the ruins. Narrow streets wind between ancient buildings. Broken stairways lead toward upper fortifications. Watchtowers overlook enormous distances across the desert plains, and everywhere, the city rises in layers toward the citadel standing above everything else. The fortress was designed carefully. Multiple defensive walls protected different sections of the city. Moats surrounded parts of the complex, and higher areas remained increasingly protected as visitors moved toward the ruler's quarters at the summit. The upper citadel deepens the atmosphere further. Standing at the highest point, the surrounding desert stretches endlessly toward the horizon. Palm groves appear below like green islands surrounded by dry earth, and the isolation becomes easier to understand. Control the fortress, and you controlled one of the most important desert settlements in the region. Researchers believe Bam became famous not only for defense but also for production and trade. The city developed strong connections to textiles, cotton goods and commercial networks spreading across large sections of the ancient world. The surrounding desert changes everything emotionally. During the day, heat shimmers above the earth. Dust moves across empty plains. At night, the sky fills with stars above the silent fortress walls. The landscape feels harsh, yet strangely beautiful. And because the city was built almost entirely from mud brick, the architecture appears grown from the desert itself. The walls, towers and homes share the same colours as the surrounding earth. The city feels connected to the landscape rather than placed upon it. Then came centuries of change. Empires shifted, trade routes transformed, political power moved elsewhere, and gradually, the fortress city lost the importance it once held. By the late 19th century, the many residents had already left the old fortified city behind. The ancient streets grew quieter, buildings stood empty, wind moved through abandoned sections of the fortress, yet much of Bam survived surprisingly intact for generations. Then disaster struck. In 2003, a devastating earthquake struck the region, causing enormous destruction across both the modern city and the ancient citadel. Large sections of the fortress collapsed beneath the force of the earthquake. Walls crumbled, towers fell. Entire sections of the ancient city were reduced to rubble almost overnight. For many people, the images felt heartbreaking. One of the world's largest mud brick fortresses suddenly appeared shattered beneath dust and debris. Yet reconstruction slowly began. Workers, historians, and preservation teams spent years restoring sections of the ancient city while trying to preserve what remained of its original design. Even now, parts of the fortress continue carrying visible traces of both destruction and restoration. Ancient walls stand beside rebuilt sections. Collapsed ruins remain visible near restored towers. The city tells multiple stories at once. The story of its creation, its centuries of survival, and the disaster that nearly erased it. Some visitors later imagined hidden chambers still existed somewhere beneath the fortress, untouched by both earthquakes and time. Others believed ancient trade goods and forgotten records remained buried beneath collapsed neighbourhoods waiting to be uncovered. And when evening light spreads across the desert walls, the giant fortress still looks less like a ruin and more like the remains of an entire world rising quietly from the sands of Iran. The ancient fortress kingdom hidden in Armenia's highlands. High in the mountains of Armenia, surrounded by volcanic plains, dry hills and endless winds sweeping across the highlands, there are ruins of an ancient fortress city built by a forgotten kingdom long before Rome reached the region. Massive defensive walls rising above the cliffs, ancient temples and royal halls buried beneath stone, and a giant fortress complex hidden high above the valleys where kings once ruled one of the oldest kingdoms in the Caucasus. The place is known as Erebuni, and even today, its ruined fortress remains one of the most mysterious ancient strongholds anywhere in Armenia. Because this was not simply a military outpost, it was a royal mountain citadel built to dominate the highlands themselves. Erebuni stands above the modern city of Yerevan, surrounded by dry volcanic landscapes, distant mountain ranges, and enormous open skies stretching across the Armenian plateau. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves across rocky hills beneath pale clouds. Dust drifts across broken stone foundations. And rising above the plains themselves, the ancient fortress ruins still overlook the valleys exactly where rulers built them thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive stone walls climbing the hilltop, ancient gateways leading into ruined courtyards, fragments of temples, storage halls, and royal chambers scattered across the fortress summit. The atmosphere surrounding Erebuni feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads across the volcanic stone while long shadows move slowly through the ruined fortress walls. And because the highlands stretch endlessly beyond the hilltop, the entire settlement feels isolated from the modern world below. Historians believe Erebuni was founded during the ancient kingdom of Urartu nearly 3,000 years ago. The Urartians built powerful fortified cities across the mountains surrounding Lake Van and the Armenian highlands during the Iron Age. At their height, they controlled major territories throughout the region long before later empires expanded into the Caucasus. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders constructed massive defensive walls using enormous stone foundations combined with mud brick upper structures rising high above the cliffs. The fortress overlooked major routes through the surrounding valleys, allowing rulers to control movement across the highlands. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Broken stairways climb toward ancient platforms where royal buildings once stood. Open courtyards overlook enormous distances across the plains below. Wind echoes through collapsed chambers where priests, soldiers, and rulers once gathered centuries ago. The fortress feels less like a ruin, and more like the remains of a forgotten mountain kingdom frozen above the landscape. Researchers discovered ancient inscriptions carved into stone, identifying kings who ordered construction of the fortress. Those inscriptions connected Erebuni directly to the powerful rulers of Urartu, whose civilization once rivaled neighbouring kingdoms across the ancient Near East. The temples deepen the atmosphere further. Sacred areas once stood inside the fortress dedicated to ancient gods worshipped by the Urartians. Ceremonial spaces, altars, and religious chambers formed part of the royal complex hidden within the mountain stronghold. The surrounding Armenian highlands change everything emotionally. Dry grasslands stretch toward distant snow-covered peaks beneath changing skies. Storms move quickly across the plateau, and because the fortress rises above the surrounding plains, the sense of visibility feels enormous. Ancient guards could likely observe approaching travellers and armies from miles away. The volcanic landscape also shaped the fortress itself. Dark stone foundations blend naturally into the rocky hills surrounding the site. Even now, parts of the ruins almost appear grown directly from the mountain. Then came centuries of war and invasion. Empires crossed the Caucasus repeatedly. The Urartian kingdom weakened. Rival powers expanded into the region, and gradually, the ancient fortress city declined while newer civilizations rose across the highlands below. Earthquakes damaged sections of the walls. Mud brick structures slowly collapsed beneath weather and time, and over generations. Large parts of the royal citadel faded into ruins overlooking the valleys beneath the Armenian sky. Yet traces of the ancient kingdom still survived. Fragments of painted walls, stone foundations, ancient inscriptions carved by rulers nearly 3,000 years ago. The mountain fortress never disappeared completely. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still existed beneath the hill, leading toward buried royal chambers untouched for centuries. Others imagined treasures from the lost kingdom of Urartu remained sealed somewhere beneath collapsed sections of the fortress. And during quiet evenings, when cold wind moves across the Armenian highlands and shadows spread slowly through the ruined stone walls, Erebuni still feels like the remains of an ancient kingdom watching silently above the mountains. The giant stone fortress towers hidden on an island. On the island of Sardinia, surrounded by rocky hills, dry grasslands, and the endless waters of the Mediterranean, there are ruins of massive stone towers built by a civilization that still remains deeply mysterious even today. Gigantic circular fortresses rising from the earth, ancient underground chambers hidden beneath stone, and a strange prehistoric complex so old that historians still debate exactly how the builders organized such enormous construction projects thousands of years ago. The place is known as Sunuraksi, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary megalithic ruins anywhere in Europe. Because this was not simply a village, it was a giant stone stronghold built by a civilization that vanished long before the modern world began. Sunaraxi stands in central Sardinia, surrounded by rolling hills, dry fields, olive trees, and distant mountains beneath enormous Mediterranean skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves through tall grass beneath pale sunlight. Birds circle quietly above the stone ruins. And rising from the landscape itself, the massive fortress towers dominate the hilltop exactly where ancient builders placed them more than 3,000 years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Enormous circular stone towers built from giant black basalt blocks stacked without mortar. Massive defensive walls surrounding hidden courtyards and underground chambers, and ancient stairways disappearing deep inside the fortress itself. The atmosphere surrounding Sunaraxi feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden light spreads across the dark volcanic stone while shadows slowly fill the inner corridors and chambers hidden beneath the towers. And because the fortress rises alone above the surrounding plains, the ruins almost feel disconnected from ordinary history. Historians believe Sunaraxi was built by the mysterious Nuragic civilization, which dominated Sardinia during the Bronze Age, long before Roman control reached the island. The Nuragic people constructed thousands of stone towers known as nuraghes across Sardinia, yet large parts of their society still remain uncertain. No long-written histories survived, no detailed records explaining exactly how their civilization functioned. Only stone remains scattered across the island. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported and stacked gigantic basalt stones into enormous circular towers without modern cranes or machinery. Certain blocks weigh many tons, yet the walls remain standing after thousands of years of earthquakes, storms, invasions, and erosion. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the fortress. Narrow stone passages twist through thick defensive walls. Ancient stairways spiral upward inside the towers. Hidden chambers open beneath enormous stone ceilings, balanced perfectly above the ground. The engineering feels astonishing emotionally. Everything was built from massive stone fitted carefully together by hand. Researchers believe Sunaraxi functioned as far more than a military fortress. The complex likely became the centre of a larger community containing homes, workshops, storage areas, ritual spaces and gathering places surrounding the central towers. At its height, hundreds of people may have lived around the stone stronghold itself. The central tower deepens the atmosphere further. Once rising far higher than today's surviving ruins, the massive keep overlooked enormous distances across the Sardinian plains. From the upper sections, approaching travellers or enemies could likely be seen from miles away. The fortress dominated the surrounding landscape completely. The underground chambers add another layer of mystery. Some rooms remain cool and dark beneath the towers connected through narrow stone corridors hidden deep inside the structure. Researchers still debate the purpose of certain spaces: storage, defense, ceremony, possibly all at once. Standing inside them feels strangely claustrophobic. Cold air moves through darkness while faint light enters through ancient openings above. The surrounding landscape changes everything emotionally. Dry hills stretch endlessly beneath changing Mediterranean skies. Storm clouds move across distant mountains, and because Sardinia itself remained isolated from larger mainland empires for long periods, the Nuragic civilization developed in relative separation from much of the ancient world surrounding it. That isolation deepens the mystery enormously. Thousands of nurags once existed across the island, ranging from small towers to giant fortress complexes like Sunaraxi. Yet historians still cannot fully explain why so many were built, or exactly how Nuragic society organized itself across Sardinia. The civilization feels strangely hidden behind its own stone monuments. Then came centuries of change. Phoenicians arrived. Carthaginians expanded into the Mediterranean. Later, Rome conquered Sardinia itself, and gradually, the old Nuragic world declined while newer cultures spread across the island. Some towers collapsed, others were abandoned quietly beneath wind and grass. Yet Sunaraxi survived surprisingly well compared to many other prehistoric sites across Europe. Excavations later uncovered traces of everyday life hidden within the ruins. pottery fragments, tools, weapons, ancient wells and storage spaces preserved beneath the stone fortress. Each discovery revealed small pieces of a civilization still largely hidden by time. Some visitors later believed undiscovered chambers still existed beneath the fortress, untouched for thousands of years. Others imagined the Nuragic people possessed lost engineering knowledge, allowing them to construct giant towers across Sardinia with astonishing precision. And during quiet evenings, when Mediterranean wind moves through the ancient stone corridors and shadows spread slowly across the basalt towers, Sunuraxi barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient cliff fortress, hidden above Arizona's desert. High above the desert valleys of Arizona, built directly into the side of a towering limestone cliff, there are ruins of an ancient settlement so perfectly hidden that it almost disappears into the mountain itself. Stone homes suspended high above the canyon floor, ancient rooms carved beneath enormous rock overhangs, and a mysterious cliff dwelling where entire communities once lived, protected above the desert below. The place is known as Montezuma's Castle, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary ancient cliff settlements ever discovered in North America. Because this was not simply a group of caves, it was a carefully built fortress hidden inside the cliffs themselves. Montezuma's Castle stands in central Arizona, surrounded by dry valleys, rocky canyons, cactus-covered hills, and endless desert skies stretching across the American Southwest. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across the valley beneath pale sunlight. Birds circle above the cliffs, and high within the limestone wall itself, the ancient stone settlement appears almost impossible against the vertical rock face. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Multi-story stone rooms built directly into a giant natural alcove high above the ground. Ancient wooden beams still visible beneath the cliff overhang, and narrow openings leading into chambers hidden safely inside the mountain. The atmosphere surrounding the ruins feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads across the limestone cliffs, while shadows slowly fill the hidden rooms suspended above the valley floor. And because the settlement remains tucked so naturally into the rock, it almost feels invisible from certain angles. Historians believe Montezuma's Castle was built by the Sinagua people nearly 1,000 years ago, long before European arrival in North America. Despite the name, the site has no connection to the Aztec ruler Montezuma. Early settlers simply misunderstood the origins of the ruins. The real builders created one of the most advanced cliff dwellings in the American Southwest centuries earlier. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders carried stone, wood, water, food, and supplies up steep cliffs without modern equipment. The settlement eventually contained dozens of rooms arranged across multiple levels hidden beneath the giant rock overhang. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing below the cliffs. The dwelling feels both protected and isolated, high enough to remain safe from floods and enemies, yet hidden so naturally inside the mountain that it almost blends completely into the landscape surrounding it. Researchers believe the location was chosen carefully. The enormous limestone overhang shielded the settlement from rain, intense desert heat, and erosion while providing natural defensive advantages above the valley. The cliff itself became part of the architecture. The surrounding landscape changes everything emotionally. Dry desert stretches beneath enormous skies. Cactus and scrub cover the valley floor. Storms move dramatically across the canyon during monsoon season, while lightning flashes above the cliffs. And high above everything, the ancient dwelling remains fixed within the stone exactly where its builders left it centuries ago. The interior chambers deepen the atmosphere further. Small rooms once served as homes, storage areas, gathering spaces, and places for daily life hidden safely within the cliff walls. Wooden ladders likely connected different levels of the settlement, allowing movement between the rooms suspended above the valley. The engineering still feels astonishing emotionally. Ancient people created a permanent multi-story settlement directly inside a vertical cliff, without metal tools or modern machinery. The isolation of the site also deepens the mystery. The Sinagua people survived within difficult desert conditions using farming, trade, and careful water management across the harsh landscape of the Southwest. Communities like Montezuma's Castle became part of a much larger network of settlements spread throughout the region. Then gradually, life changed. environmental pressure, drought, migration, and shifting trade patterns likely affected the surrounding communities over generations, and eventually, the cliff settlement was abandoned. The rooms emptied, wooden ladders disappeared, silence replaced the sounds of daily life inside the cliff dwelling. Yet the dry desert climate helped preserve much of the structure for centuries. The giant overhang protected the ancient rooms while the cliffs kept the settlement hidden above the valley floor. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still existed deeper inside the cliff beyond the visible rooms. Others imagined ancient pathways once connected the fortress dwelling to secret caves hidden throughout the canyon walls. And during quiet evenings, when shadows move slowly across the limestone cliffs and desert wind rises through the valley below, Montezuma's castle barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient stone tombs hidden in Sweden's cold highlands. Deep within the countryside of Sweden, surrounded by quiet fields, cold forests, and rolling northern hills, there are ancient stone tombs older than written history itself. Massive burial chambers built from giant slabs of rock. Ancient standing stones scattered across the landscape, and mysterious graves left behind by forgotten people thousands of years before the Viking Age even began. The place is known as Archaeological, and even today, it remains one of the strangest prehistoric burial landscapes anywhere in Scandinavia. Because this was not simply a cemetery. It was a sacred landscape, shaped across thousands of years by generations who vanished long before modern Europe existed. Archaeological lies in southern Sweden, surrounded by open farmland, forests, rocky hills, and quiet northern skies stretching across the countryside. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves through tall grass beneath grey clouds. Mist drifts across empty fields during early morning, and scattered across the landscape itself, enormous stone monuments rise silently from the earth. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Huge stone slabs balanced into burial chambers. Circular stone formations spread across grassy hills. Ancient standing stones rising alone against the sky, exactly where prehistoric builders placed them thousands of years ago. The atmosphere surrounding the tombs feels deeply strange, especially during fog. Shadows move slowly across the ancient stones, while silence covers the fields around them, and because the monuments stand exposed against the northern landscape, they almost feel separated from ordinary time itself. Historians believe Archaeological contains graves and monuments created across multiple prehistoric periods stretching back more than 5,000 years. Different generations returned repeatedly to the same sacred landscape, building new tombs beside older ones already ancient even in their own time. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported and lifted giant stone slabs weighing many tons without modern machinery or metal technology. Certain burial chambers still remain standing after surviving thousands of years of storms, freezing winters, and erosion across the Scandinavian countryside. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking among the ruins. The tombs feel permanent, heavy, almost timeless against the quiet landscape around them. Researchers discovered different types of monuments throughout the area: passage graves, stone circles, standing stones, and burial structures from entirely different eras layered across the same fields. That mixture transformed Archaeological into something larger than a single archaeological site. It became a landscape of memory preserved across thousands of years. The burial chambers deepen the atmosphere further. Some tombs contain narrow stone passages leading towards central chambers hidden beneath enormous capstones. Others remain partially collapsed with giant stones scattered across the grass after centuries of weather and time. Standing inside them feels strangely claustrophobic. Cold air lingers between the stones while faint light enters through narrow openings above. The surrounding countryside changes everything emotionally. Forests move gently in the distance beneath enormous skies. Rain drifts slowly across the fields, and because the landscape remains quiet and lightly populated, the ancient monuments still dominate the atmosphere around them. Researchers believe prehistoric communities likely viewed the area as sacred long before later monuments were added. Generations returned repeatedly to bury their dead beside older graves already connected to ancestors, memory, and ritual significance. That continuity lasted for thousands of years. The mystery surrounding the tombs only deepened over time. because unlike later civilizations that left written records explaining their beliefs, the people who built the earliest monuments left only stone behind. No surviving texts, no clear explanations, only giant burial structures standing silently across the Swedish countryside. Then came centuries of change. Climate shifted, cultures transformed, new kingdoms emerged across Scandinavia, and eventually, the ancient burial grounds faded quietly into the landscape while forests and farmland surrounded the old monuments. Some tombs collapsed beneath erosion, others survived almost untouched, hidden beneath grass and moss. Yet the giant stones remained standing where prehistoric builders raised them long before the modern world began. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still existed beneath unexplored mounds surrounding the site. Others imagined forgotten rituals once took place among the standing stones during the long northern winters, and during quiet evenings, when fog moves slowly across the Swedish fields and shadows stretch over the ancient tombs. Ekornevallen barely feels connected to the present day at all.